Good morning. How many of you were secretly tempted to sing along? It's Joy to see a few more folks here than we often have in the past, so that's a good sign. Please continue to spread the word. We try to do something really spirited each Sunday, and the more people who are here, the more I think we feel the spirit. If you are new to our congregation and would like to just say hello and stand up and share your name, this would be a great time to do that. Anybody fit that bill or want to stand and say their name? We'll be grateful for your presence for however long your presence is here. I just want to mention a brief thing about our attempts to keep us all safe. We ask if you're not actually standing up here, setting a bad example like me with no mask, but when you're this distance, it's okay to speak. But anytime you're closer, we do ask that people wear a mask. And if you're not with someone who's already in your pod, the people you know you can be safe with, then just to keep a little distance to keep yourself and everyone else safe. And it's really just our attempt to try to preserve the health of our community. Even with all that, we still get a chance to come and be together in person. And Frank, do we have some folks who are tuning in remotely?
Yes, we do. Let's see here. We have Molly, Tara, Tim, and Carlene, Liz, Emma, Ellen, Joan, Catherine, Lynx, Christine, Bill and Ashley, and Karen. So we have quite a few.
Wonderful. Tell them they're all welcome. So I assume you have an order. There's one thing that's slightly amiss in the order, and that's because we practice imperfection in this building. We've worked at it long and hard, and we've got it down to a science. And today's particular imperfect moment is that probably because of yours unruly, the order of worship had the prelude being what you just heard, the little duet between Jim and I. And then that would have been the music as we enter. So now, after I've said, I think what I need to say with, I'm going to invite Jim a little more fully after I light the chalice, but I didn't think to get someone to light said chalice. Is there someone who might be willing to do that? Thank you, Andrew. And you'll see the words. Oh, I thought you would see the words to the chalice lighting, but no problem. I will recite the words to the chalice lighting. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of community, the energy that we get when we experience connection and harmony. So I'd now like to invite Jim and the Noonday Singers to share the prelude. And it's just an opportunity for all of us, most of us know this, to just sit back and enjoy a little bit of a musical offering. Today it's kind of special because we've got quite the choir, as you're about to hear.
Thanks so much, Rob. Rob and I go way back. And he plays a wicked harmonica, doesn't he? I must tell you a quick story about that opening music that we played. See if some of you remember this. Years back, we were singing at a homeless shelter. And on that occasion, we were singing music from My Fair Lady. We often sang music from Broadway shows. But as we were singing one of the songs, I suddenly gasped. We were singing at a homeless shelter, and we were singing on the street where you live. Before we sing, let me introduce the members of the Noonday Singers. There's a nice bit of introduction about the singers in the program. Let me say first that the singers are being led today by Evelyn McDougall, who lived with us at Noonday Farm and sang with us, but is better known in this Greenfield area as the founder and director of the singing group Fiery Hope, formerly known as the Amandla Singers. We are very fortunate indeed to have Evelyn leading us today. And the others are Bill Beardsley, Reverend Bill, Margaret Hawthorne, Casey Conlon, Claire Pearson, Kate Stevens, Reverend Kate, who has preached here many times, Lisa Marr, and Louise Cochran, who's my partner. Each one of these persons is a remarkable story. We want to sing for you now the most popular song known today in South Africa, known by every single person, even sung at rugby games. It was a song of the South African miners, Shosholoza. Shosholoza.
Shosholoza, kuwezamtaba, simbelas kumbezimbabwe. Wenyabaleka, kuwezamtaba, simbelas kumbezimbabwe. Wenyabaleka, kuwezamtaba, simbelas kumbezimbabwe.
Shosholoza,
Shosholoza, 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 kuwezamtaba, simbelas kumbezimbabwe.
So it's an honor and really a deep personal pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. I've long admired Jim for his wisdom. I also love his whimsy. And he's got that kind of blend of head and heart that's really IQ and EQ. He's also a man who's figured out a really strong devotion to both kindness and conviction, You throw in musicality and community, and I think we are in good hands for this morning. Jim was involved in interfaith work before interfaith was fashionable. Back in the midst of 9/11 and rampant Islamophobia, Jim led the Jewish congregation of Brattleboro into what became a nationally recognized effort to facilitate Muslim-Jewish understanding through the Salaam-Shalom Program. Jim has also been a faculty member at MIT, Tufts University, and the SIT Graduate Institute, but I'm sure his greatest accomplishment is his children, and one of his son Noah has been really passionate about doing something for the children in Calcutta, and that's how I met Jim, was seeing him and his son at All Souls, except the All Souls was the Brattleboro version. And father and son spoke with such sincere dedication and such kind of camaraderie that they really just moved me. And I've been grateful to know Jim and a little bit his family ever since. And I'm so tickled that you'll get to know Jim a little bit here this morning. So no further ado, over to you, Jim.
Thanks again, Rob. Son Noah is very much with us in spirit today. On to the children's story, Children for All Ages. How many of you are baseball fans? So I would like to dedicate this story to all of you. And also, I want to dedicate the story to David Spate, one of our noonday farmers and singers who isn't able to be here today because he's in Kentucky helping families which have been devastated by the terrible floods in that state. David, to my mind, is the ultimate baseball fan. So David, this story is for you and for you fans. Here we go. Young Ira was seriously retarded, both mentally and physically, and was institutionalized. But his father visited often, and they would take walks together. On one of these walks, they passed a park where a Little League baseball game was underway. The boy looked so unhappy, and he lamented that he would never be able to participate in such a game. And the father, of course, felt wretched pangs of sadness and helplessness. He was so upset, in fact, that on a mad instinct, he directed his son to the baseball diamond and spoke to one of the coaches. Was there a chance, he asked, that his son might have just one chance to play? The coach understood and put Ira into the lineup, not expecting that doing so could have any effect on a game where his team was far behind. Surprisingly, however, in this, the last inning, Ira's team began to catch up. And now, with the winning runs on base, it was Ira's turn to bat. Ira's father was sure that his son would be lifted, but the coach kept him in. And Ira stepped into the batter's box. It was clear from the first pitch that Ira had no idea what to do, or even how to hold the bat properly. Once the pitcher realized this, however, he moved closer and pitched in the ball underhand. Ira could do no better than chop at the ball. So one of Ira's teammates walked up to him and helped him hold the bat. When the next pitch came in, bat met ball, and the ball dribbled down the third baseline. While Ira was helped along toward first base, the catcher retrieved the ball and threw it way over the head of the first baseman. As the ball bounced into left field, Ira was guided toward second base. The left fielder finally got to the ball and threw it not to second base, but to center field. Ira was now rounding second and heading to third as the center fielder picked up the ball and threw it to right field. Now Ira was heading home. And as he crossed the plate, a tremendous cheer went up from the crowd. And before anyone could fully comprehend what had happened, Ira's teammates and the members of the other team hoisted Ira onto their shoulders and paraded around the field. It was a messianic moment. 18 young persons from New York were helping God to perfect the world. They were truly God's partners. They knew what social justice was all about, and they were American baseball at its very best. Amen.
Jim, as one of the people who loves baseball, when the ball goes to first base, they throw it into right. It's all right. We're the Church of Imperfection. We're good with that. I think there's another hymn coming before we do the covenant. Yes. Okay. So let's invite the Noonday Singers to come up. You have the words in your order of service. Freedom is coming, and we're all welcome with our masks on to sing and be part of this hymn.
Oh, yes, I know. 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 Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Oh yes, I know. 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 Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I know. 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 Oh yes, I know.
I'm sorry, Eveline, but that will have to be the last song that you do. It was too perfect. So in your order of service is our congregational covenant. And I would love it if we could read it together, but I would love it also if we could take a second as we're reading it to let the words sink in. They really are our kind of best thinking about who we want to be and how we want to be. And I find it every Sunday a really helpful reminder to just take that extra second of consciousness to just really notice the words and let them take on as much meaning as they choose in the moment in your mind. So I'll start with the first line and then let's read it all together. In this house, we covenant with one another to create a community built on a foundation of love, to work together to promote equality, justice, and peace, accepting responsibility for our individual acts, to stand on the side of love, embracing the liberation of oppressed minorities and working to end discrimination and unjust privilege, to communicate with kindness and support, to serve with compassion and commitment, to listen respectfully and value our diversity as a source of our collective strength, to learn and grow together, generously sharing our time, talents, and treasures, to celebrate the joys of discovery from the wonder of youth to the wisdom of age, and to openly share our laughter and our tears, showing reverence for the divine in all that is. Amen. So in just a moment, I'm going to invite the Noonday Singers back up here, but this is a chance for us to be generous. This is a big building and there are big expenses, and I guarantee you anything that you contribute today will be put to really good use. So in just a minute, Russ, is there anyone else that you have joining you? Good. They'll come down the aisles, and while they're doing that, if the Noonday Singers could inspire people to be even more generous with your rendition.
I've been reading and hearing some stories about a rabbi friend of a friend that I find quite fascinating. I'm told on good authority that this rabbi is known to some of you in the congregation. He's also well known to some of my fellow Noonday Singers. By all accounts, he epitomizes the concept of social justice. Allow me to share just some of these stories with you. What I find particularly intriguing about this rabbi is that his primary concern was not keeping the membership lists in order, not assuring that the dues had been paid, not obsessing with making sure that the religious services were drawn up and the service programs printed well in advance. No, this rabbi focused on inequality and the plight of the disadvantaged. He consistently urged compassion toward those in need, and sadly, this got him into difficulty, particularly when some of those folks he was helping had broken the law. Not all of the leaders in his community had patience with or much compassion, in fact, for the disadvantaged. They were more concerned with keeping up appearances, maintaining a respectable synagogue, and ensuring that it was well-governed, well-funded, and had influence in the community. The congregation, I should add, was not the least bit reform It was full of rules, and if you broke with those rules, you were in trouble. But the rabbi was a contagious optimist. He believed that every form of evil, every type of sickness, suffering, misery, oppression, fear, and injustice could be overcome one step at a time, and that the first step begins with ourselves. The rabbi didn't have much money, but he often invited people over to his home, sometimes even to a restaurant or a rented hall for a meal. They had a reputation of being cheerful, jovial affairs. The synagogue leaders were often invited, but after a while they stopped coming, not being too comfortable with so many of the rabbi's other guests. Some of those guests not even members of the congregation, at least not dues-paying members. Among the guests were usually at least a few Jews who had intermarried, making the synagogue leaders even more uncomfortable. And to top it off, the rabbi even invited recently released inmates from the local prison, and once even a woman who had a pretty bad reputation around town. The rabbi was certainly aware about how the synagogue leaders reacted, but he continued to invite them to his parties regardless. And imagine this, the rabbi practiced Reiki, although I'm not absolutely sure he used the word. Well, most persons doing Reiki, like my wife Louise, have to go through a course of study. The rabbi seems to have intuited it. Lots of congregants asked for it, and they all appreciated it. Some found the healing on the edge of miraculous. Many wanted him to teach them. His comment was something like, "It can't be taught, it can only be caught." He encouraged these folks to try it, but to couple the Reiki with prayer and then to pass it forward. As you can see, the rabbi was not quite what the synagogue leaders imagined. How had they selected such an independent soul? How long would they have to put up with him? Stories abound about this rabbi. They remind me just a bit of stories and now books that circulate about Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, the so-called singing rabbi of the Upper West Side of New York, who couldn't keep $1 in his pocket because there always was someone who needed it more than he did. Here's another amazing story, although it may be apocryphal. I may have gotten some of the details wrong, but this is the way I like to tell it. A young fellow from the congregation was hooked on drugs, and to support his habit, he committed a robbery. This was a crime, of course, both according to civil law and to Talmudic law. The young man, let's call him Nathan, fled town and remained hidden from sight for a long time. After several years, his father received a letter. Nathan was repentant, and he promised to work hard to repay those from whom he had stolen. He was asking for forgiveness, but he had no real expectation that it would be offered. In his letter, Nathan told his father that he'd come home if his father wanted him to. He told his father that if he wanted Nathan to return, he could put a sign on a tree. The tree a few hundred yards before the train station under which the kids used to play while watching the trains go by. Nathan told his father that from his seat in the train, he would look for a white ribbon on one of the branches. look for a white ribbon on one of the branches of the tree as the train passed. If there's a white ribbon on the tree, Nathan wrote, then I'll get off. If not, I'll just keep on riding to wherever the train goes. Nathan's father spoke with the rabbi, and then imagine this. They both drove to the tree and they covered every single branch of that tree with white ribbons. They then returned to the father's home and prepared a most sumptuous welcome home meal. Steaks from locally grown grass-fed plump calves. I don't think the rabbi was a vegetarian. Nathan could not stop weeping tears of joy, nor could his father. Did the synagogue leaders get it? I doubt it. It's been argued that nothing is more impervious to change than religious zeal. There was a third incident which received lots of attention in the synagogue community and further confused the leadership. Right in the middle of one of the services, a major one, synagogue leaders began auctioning off aliyahs. These are the special honors when one is called to offer a Torah blessing. The rabbi was furious, and he called a halt to the auctioning. Torah blessings, he said, were sacred, and such commerce has no place in a synagogue or a service of worship. It might seem from these stories that the rabbi had little regard for the law, the 613 commandments of Hebrew scripture, the laws which the synagogue leadership were so determined to uphold. My guess is that this wasn't the case. What the rabbi objected to were not the laws per se, but rather the legalistic, compassionless, and sometimes hypocritical ways in which these laws were used and interpreted. I'm guessing that ultimately the rabbi simply wanted the law to be used for people and not against people. You won't be surprised to learn that some in the congregation supported the rabbi wholeheartedly, sharing his deep compassion for those in need and a little frustrated by the synagogue leadership, fixated as the leaders seemed to be with rules, perhaps missing the essence of the religion. At one point, a pretty large group of these frustrated congregants met the rabbi in the town common, said they were ready to join him in staging a revolt. Some were local fishermen who said they would be willing to put aside their nets to join the cause. It would be pretty ugly, they told them, but they had some confidence they could pull it off. I have to say that in a similar situation, I probably would have said, thanks, guys, let's go for it. But the rabbi didn't. He thanked them. He was grateful for their support, but he asked that they devote their energies instead to acts of kindness, to seeking to reduce social and economic inequality, and to prayer. I wonder deep down if the synagogue leaders weren't maybe a bit envious of the rabbi, not only because of his popularity with so many of the congregants, but also because in their heart of hearts, they may have sensed that his understanding of the world and of God's will was ultimately deeper and more profound than their own. They nonetheless felt it was their responsibility to deal with the rabbi's behavior. As they saw it, he simply wasn't abiding by their authority. So they called for a meeting of senior leaders of the branch of Judaism to deal with their rabbi problem. And they invited the rabbi to attend. I've been privy to the notes of that meeting, and I find it so interesting that the rabbi said so little in his own defense. At the same time, there was no indication at all that he was frightened. Virtually the only thing he offered in the meeting was his hope for a better world. a world based on compassion, and his hope that that better world could begin right there in their own congregation, that they themselves could begin by turning away from the worldly values of money and possession and prestige and status and privilege and power, and from the group solidarities restricted by race and class and party and religion and nationalism, that our God wanted not to be feared and obeyed, but rather to be recognized in those sufferings of the poor and the weak. And that our God even wanted us to love our enemies. This was his fervent prayer. I'm told, sadly, by friends from all faiths, that there was nothing particularly unique about that rabbi's congregation, that all too many congregations in all faiths have failed to follow the true teachings of its founders. I'm told, however, on excellent authority, that the All Souls Church of Greenfield is not among them. The rabbi has long since passed away. After he died, many called him Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. They started a new religion in his name. But a few others, thinking about the life that this rabbi had led, about his unrelenting compassion, about his empathy for the poor and the outcast, and about his steadfastness in the face of the greatest opposition, and seeking to emulate his example, have said something else. These followers, some today, some in first century Palestine, argue that even if one cannot believe in post-resurrection Christology, and I as a Jew certainly cannot, the life and teachings of this rabbi in and of themselves can be sufficient basis for belief. Let me close by sharing with you the time I almost met the rabbi. My wife Louise and I were part of a tour group on the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem, when all of a sudden someone yelled to us to move to the side of the path. We did, and a poorly clad man, some described him later as a Palestinian laborer, struggled up the path, nearly doubled over from the weight of a steel beam he was carrying on his shoulder. Seeing his suffering, I said to myself, go and help that man. Go and pick up the back of that beam. But by the time the message reached my feet, the man had turned the corner and he was gone. A moment later, we reached the next station of the cross, and our tour guide translated the message into English. It read, "Who would come to the aid of a condemned man?" Since that day, I have tried hard to get my feet to follow those instructions of the heart. I hope I have been doing better. Amen.
Singing in the the light of God. We are praying in the light of God. We are praying in the light of God. We are praying, praying, we are praying, praying, we are praying in the light of God. We are praying, praying, we are.
So I think almost everyone here has probably experienced this ritual. It's actually, I think, one of our best ways to build community, because those of us who have a joy to share, it is nice to be able to share with people who are happy to celebrate it with us. And for those of us who are struggling or have a deep concern, it can bring support to be able to air it in public. All that said, there's no one right way. So if you would prefer to light a candle individually and in silence, there are candles over there, and you're certainly welcome to do that. Kate, are you maybe getting up to be willing to light the candles, or you're going? Okay. All right, thank you. So we're also going to, at some point, hear from folks on Zoom if they would like to share a joy and concern, but it costs extra to do so if you're on Zoom. So it's a slight surcharge, not very much. Okay, so would anyone like to share a joy or concern? I don't know what we're doing in terms of the microphone. Should we just ask people to? Oh, Kate, God bless her. Okay, so just raise your hand and Kate will come over to you, and you can please speak into the microphone. Sometimes if you hold it far away, it's hard for those of us to hear. Who would like to light a candle of joy and concern? Annie looks like she has something she can offer, Kate.
Morning, church. I know I always feel rushed. I don't know why I feel rushed with sharing, but my heart is full of joy and broken open. A big light for Jim, for your sharing, for the compassionate way of those young people that could help that young boy who could never really be part of that baseball. Your second thing for the Rebbe, who didn't care about clothes or following the rules here, but the higher rules that he lived by. Such a light that he shone. Another part of that candle is I've been going to synagogue for 28 years, maybe. Who's counting that, this or that? And yesterday was the first legal beagle kind of where I was invited up for an aliyah for those working for peace and justice in the world. And as I stood, I thought of all those known and unknown that came before me, those who stand today, and all those that would be present tomorrow that we don't know about, those who stand. And candle for sadness. I have a good friend, her name is Jody, and her husband of many, many years is going to be making transition. So I'd like to hold her in my thoughts and hearts today. And one more, Evelyn MacDougall, who I've known for so many years, more than you want to know. And the people that come and uplift us with their hearts and their song. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Andrew Baker, and I just want to light a candle of joy. Well, I also second Annie in saying thank you, Jim, for the wonderful stories and the story about our Jewish Rebbe, Yeshua. And just a candle of joy for my wife, Andrea, who entered the mikveh bath last Sunday, just after I offered my service here, and affirmed her identity within the Jewish religion. So she is starting on her journey there, and my blessings go with her.
Good morning. My name is Russ. You don't have to light a candle if you don't want to, but I'm just feeling so joyous. This is the first time, I've been coming here for a long time, but today was the first time, and I don't know how long, that I was clapping with the music. It just felt so uplifting, so joyous. Thank you.
Did it make you want to consider converting to Judaism, Russ?
Gee, I'll have to check my essay book about it.
Take down my mask. I'm Evelyn McDougall. Almost 19 years ago, I was in labor to give birth to my son, and it kind of went on for a while. And a very dear friend was helping me as my buddy and coach and cheerleader. And when we ended up having to transfer to the hospital from our planned home birth, this friend said to me, this is great, but I have to be at the All Souls Unitarian Church soon to give a speech. And I said, okay, I'll do what I can here. Working on it. That friend's name was Juanita Nelson. And I did manage to give birth in time for her to see her grandson and then to come here to give the welcome to the musical group called the Work of the Weavers, James Durst and friends. And the reason I'm bringing Juanita up is that I am so happy in 2023, every day of 2023, to be celebrating the centenary of Juanita Nelson's birth.
I have a joy to share. A kind of special thing has happened in my life. I was married for 10 years to Bruce Boston. He's now in assisted living in Virginia. And I've committed to publishing his sermons. We went through Princeton Theological Seminary together. We were missionaries in Malawi together. I was part of his early ministry, and he went on to be a preacher, never an ordained minister, but a lay preacher. And he wrote the most wonderful sermons. And I spent this last week rereading them. And I'm now preparing to write a preface for this publication. And it just feels such a joy to have this reunion with this early part of my life and his life, and to celebrate it together in our 80s. So it's a wonderful story of a blended family that has done very well as a family. So it's a joy for me to share that with you.
So I'm Pam, and I want to celebrate. This is the 6-month anniversary of my granddaughter's bat mitzvah. And she was bat mitzvahed one day before her birthday, or maybe it was one day after her birthday, when she turned 13. And she has become the family's chicken whisperer. It's a joy.
Frank, do we have any people on Zoom who might like to share a joy or a sorrow?
All right, you're next, Molly.
Are you going to
So
do
I'm
an,
Kirsten Levitt, and first of all, Jim, I've been searching for you for the last 5 years. Who knew? I should have just asked Evelyn. You might not remember me with my mask on, but I went to BAJC's Rosh Chodesh group and met you, and I was so happy to be able to sing your Ya'aleh, and we need to talk. So that's my first joy. Here you go. Candle just for you, Jim. This year, my son said, I never know what to get you. You have everything you need. What do you need? And I said, I need memories. I need us to build memories together. And so last Sunday, I'm sorry I missed you, Andrew, but my son and my future daughter-in-law took me to New York City for my great return after 13 years of not seeing a Broadway show to see Chicago. And we built memories because we sat in the theater where my father did the Actors Equity Fund pitch. And I sat on the steps and watched Pippin when I was a little girl, like 8 or 9. And I could bring him to the steps that I sat on. And I could share with him my life memory, and we could build our own. It was a dream come true.
Okay, Molly, go ahead.
are we going to have announcements later? Because I have to.
She wants to know if we're going to have announcements later.
If we're going to have what, Frank?
Announcements later.
This would be, if there are no more joys and sorrows, let's just do her announcement while we have her.
Okay, go ahead, Molly.
Okay. First of all, next week, the Social Justice Committee meets at 12:30. And note, it's going to be meeting in the Weldon's conference room. So that's a different place. So please note that. And the other thing that I note that is a joint venture. We have 5 different groups from the Franklin County area, all of which are doing racial justice work. And jointly, we're putting on a film Saturday afternoon, February 18th at 2 p.m. It's a film that was done by Gloria Matlock, who's given a sermon here. And she's showing a film about her mother's hometown, which is a predominantly Black community in Ohio. And she interviewed a number of the elders there. So I think it's really exciting that we're doing this jointly with Racial Justice Rising, the Interfaith Council, and a couple of other groups. It's great to see groups joining together and doing the social justice work. So I hope to see a number of people out for that as well as the meeting. Thank you.
And we have one more from Liz. Go ahead, Liz. You're muted. You have to unmute.
Hi, I'm just feeling really happy about this morning. A much needed lift for me personally, but it's just perfect. Everything, the stories, the music, the sentiment, the hope. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Okay, there we go. Anyone else? I think that's it for Zoom.
Okay, so I'm going to invite people to close their eyes if they choose and think of the things that haven't been offered. I think of people who are struggling with financial hardship and having to stand with signs while cars drive by, hoping that somebody will roll down their window and give them a few bucks. I think of people who are dealing with great physical duress and don't always have the kindness of all those young people to help them get around the bases. And I put out a special prayer during this dark time of the year for people who are especially susceptible to mental health challenges. And just know that in whatever way, kind of like the Reiki that the rabbi practices, we may not be able to describe it or explain it, but it still makes a difference to hold people in our hearts and send caring to them and prayers. Amen. So I'm going to invite Jim to come up and share the benediction, and then we have a postlude where we'll have one last lovely chance to hear the Noonday Singers, and you're welcome to stay afterwards. I believe we have a little bit of coffee and a lot of good conversation if you'd like to stay.
This is the prayer that the rabbi would have offered on such an occasion. I'll chant it in the original Aramaic, and Louise will do the English translation. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha.
May the Holy One bless you and keep you.
Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha.
May the Holy One make her face to shine upon you and be gracious to you.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
And may the Holy One lift up the light of her countenance upon you and grant you the gift of peace. And let us all say, Amen. We should say it.
We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started.